You made it. Maybe today was loud, or long, or one of those days where time stopped making sense around 3 p.m. and you forgot what you were supposed to be doing, but kept pretending you didn't. Doesn't matter now, because you're here. Feet up, lights low, phone dimmed to night mode, and brain just foggy enough to be myth compatible. So first, thank you. Thanks for clicking, for listening, for just showing up. I know there are a million other things you could be doom scrolling right now, and the fact that you chose this soft-spoken mythology rabbit hole, that means the world. If you like it here, if weird ancient stories gently retold by a sleep-deprived narrator are your thing, feel free to like, subscribe, and comment what time you're drifting off from. I love seeing those. They also let the YouTube algorithm know that mythical monsters deserve a little screen time too. So here we are, you and me. And 5 of the most legendary monsters the ancient world ever imagined. But don't worry, they've been declawed. No jump scares, no sudden roars, just soft whispers and ancient echoes, retold gently. Because this is mythology for sleep. And even the scariest creatures in Greek legend know how to speak softly, when asked nicely. So dim the lights. Tuck in, and let's wander into the darker corners of Olympus's imagination. Some of these monsters are tragic, some are terrifying, and a few might even make you feel a little bad for them right before they eat you. But each one tells a story, and each story asks a question. What makes something monstrous? What are we really afraid of? And why do we keep dreaming about them even now? Let's find out, together. First, there's Medusa. She wasn't always a monster. She used to be beautiful. A priestess, in fact. But when the gods turned against her, she turned into something far more powerful and far more dangerous. Snakes for hair, a stare that turns mortals to stone, and a legacy that just won't die, unlike most of her victims. Then we have Cerberus, the goodest bad boy of the underworld. 3 heads, 100 teeth, one job. Keep the dead in, keep the living out. Basically, an infernal hallway monitor with separation anxiety. But even monstrous dogs get tired. And not every hero who walks past him deserves to come back. After that, it's Hydra, the many-headed swamp beast of Lerna. Cut off one head, 2 more grow back, which is really just a metaphor for your inbox. The ancient Greeks used Heracles to fight it. You use caffeine and a vague sense of obligation. Then there's the Minotaur, half man, half bull, all tragedy. Trapped in a labyrinth built to hide shame, rage, and something deeper. Honestly, he just wanted to be left alone. Maybe read a book in peace. But no, someone always had to come in swinging a sword. And finally, we'll end with Typhon, the final boss of Greek mythology. A monster so big, so violent, so apocalyptically over the top that even Zeus nearly filed for early retirement. This is the monster that makes other monsters hide under their bed, before the statues, before the serpents, before the endless Halloween costumes and meme accounts. There was just a girl. Her name was Medusa, and believe it or not, she wasn't born a monster. She was born mortal. Entirely, inconveniently, tragically mortal. Which, in Greek mythology, is basically a cosmic joke waiting to happen. Medusa was the youngest of 3 sisters, the Gorgons. Her older sisters, Stheno and Euryale, were immortal. She was not. Because that's how the gods work. Equal, but also somehow wildly unequal. One of many divine HR decisions that would come back to haunt everyone. Now, depending on who you ask, or how deeply asleep you are while listening, Medusa was either A sea-born beauty with golden hair. B. A priestess of Athena sworn to chastity. C. Or a narrative device designed to punish female autonomy. All of those things might be true. None of them might be true. That's the fun of myth. Even the facts are full of snakes. Here's the part where things get difficult. You see, Medusa didn't become a monster on her own. She was made into one. The most common version of her myth goes something like this. Medusa, radiant and mortal, served as a priestess in the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, war, and the world's most judgmental owl collection. Medusa was loyal. She took her vows seriously. She kept the temple clean. She didn't flirt with mortals. She didn't talk back to deities. She didn't even steal extra olives from the offering bowls. And yet, Poseidon came, not with reverence, not with permission, but with thunder in his fists and a god's entitlement in his stride. He took what he wanted, right there, in Athena's temple. The result? Athena didn't punish Poseidon. She punished Medusa. Because when you're a mortal in a divine scandal, justice is less about fairness and more about appearances. And so Medusa was transformed, not just cursed, but remodeled. Her once beautiful hair became a writhing crown of snakes. Her soft mortal gaze became a weapon. One look, and men turned to stone, from object of desire to object of fear. And so Medusa fled. Or maybe she was cast out. Or maybe she simply wandered until the world forgot her as a woman and remembered only the myth. She made her home far from gods and mortals, in a craggy place called the Edge of the World, specifically a region near the river Oceanus, where sea met sky and logic stopped trying to make sense. The Greeks called it the ends of the earth. Modern historians call it probably Libya. But that's not quite as dramatic, so we're going with the ancient version. There, in the stone caverns, surrounded by broken statues that used to be knights, bandits, and heroes, she waited. Not for rescue, not for redemption, just existed. A girl with snakes for hair, turning away from her own reflection. And eventually, word got out. There's a monster out there, they said. She kills with a glance. She lives alone. She has no master. She's dangerous. She's unnatural. Of course, none of those things were quite true, but none of them were exactly false either. And so she became the Gorgon. Not a woman, not a victim, not even a cautionary tale. Just a thing to be conquered. Eventually, as always happens in Greek mythology, a hero showed up. This one was named Perseus. Perseus was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Danae, which already made him about 85% plot armor and 15% dramatic trauma. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just trying to avoid being murdered by a king. You see, King Polydectes wanted Perseus out of the way, so he gave him a simple task. Bring me the head of Medusa. That's like asking someone to grab a coffee and also maybe steal the moon while they're out. But Perseus, being a Greek hero, said, sure. He didn't have a plan. He didn't even have directions. But he had one thing going for him: divine nepotism. Before he set out, Perseus got a little help from the divine swag department. Athena gave him a polished shield, shiny enough to reflect danger. Hermes gave him winged sandals for speed. He also received an adamantine sickle, a helm of invisibility, and a magic bag called the Kibesis. Because nothing says fair fight like 4 gods helping you murder a traumatized woman in hiding. But again, this was myth. And in myth, tools matter as much as stories. With his toolkit ready and plot demands fully aligned, Perseus set out across the ancient world. He traveled far, through deserts, mountains, and the lands of eternal fog until he reached the Gorgon's lair. And there, in the stone garden of broken men, he found her, sleeping, peacefully, breathing in the quiet. Perseus did not speak. He did not warn her. He did not look her in the eye. Instead, he used Athena's shield as a mirror. He crept forward, slowly, silently, and when he stood above her, he raised the sickle and, in a single motion, ended her. Her eyes never opened. She never screamed. She never got to say a final word. They say her head continued to live long after it was severed, that the snakes hissed, that the eyes still turned flesh to stone, and that Perseus, holding the head by its hair, did not feel victorious, just done. Not all victories feel like triumphs. Some feel like wait. What happened next is one of the weirder chapters in Medusa's afterlife. You'd think a severed head would get a little peace and quiet. Nope. Perseus carried Medusa's head across many lands, using it as a weapon. He turned monsters to stone. He defeated kings. He even accidentally turned his friend into a statue while reaching into his backpack. Eventually, he gave the head to Athena, who mounted it on her shield, the Aegis, as a symbol of divine terror. Even in death, Medusa was useful. Even in silence, she spoke volumes. Not as a woman, not as a person, but as a warning. Let's pause for a moment. Zoom out. What was Medusa, really? A monster? A victim? A punishment? A test? Or maybe she was a symbol of what happens when a woman becomes too powerful, or too angry, or too visible. The Greeks made monsters of those who didn't conform, women who disobeyed, creatures who crossed lines, mortals who dared to survive gods. Medusa's hair wasn't just cursed, it was transformed. Snakes weren't just a threat, they were sacred, symbols of wisdom, of transformation, of life coiled into death. And her ability to turn men to stone, that wasn't just violence. That was a defense mechanism, a boundary, a scream frozen in silence. She didn't chase heroes. They came to her. Medusa didn't stay in ancient Greece. She slipped through the cracks of time, into Rome, into the Renaissance, into modern pop culture, like a whisper with fangs. To the Romans, she became a protective talisman, her head painted on armor and doorways to ward off evil. During the Renaissance, artists like Caravaggio and Leonardo brought her back in oil and marble, eyes wide, mouth frozen in the moment of death. And today, she's everywhere, tattooed on arms, printed on t-shirts, featured on luxury brand logos, feminist essays, horror films, video games, and poetry anthologies. She's no longer just a villain. She's a symbol of fury, of survival, of the fine line between beauty and terror. In a strange way, Medusa got the last word. Because you don't see Perseus on perfume bottles, do you? And so we leave her, not slain, not silenced, just still. Somewhere in the space between monster and memory, Medusa rests. Her myth is a warning, and a mirror, and a soft rustling of snakes in the night air. She reminds us that monsters aren't always born. Sometimes they're made, shaped by fear, molded by power, framed by those who needed someone to point at and say, her. That's the danger. But here, in the quiet between stories, she is not danger. She is not rage She is not a head in a bag. She is simply Medusa. And she doesn't have to turn anyone to stone tonight. She can rest. And so can you. Because the next monster is waiting. And this one has 3 heads, 1,000 teeth, and a tail that wags in the underworld. But for now, close your eyes. The snakes are sleeping, and so are you. Before you can meet Cerberus, you have to cross the river. The Greeks believed that all souls, after death, were ferried across the dark waters of the river Styx. Charon, the grim boatman, did the rowing. The dead did the waiting. And the silence between them was thicker than death itself. But if you made it to the far shore, if your coin had been paid and your name remembered, there was still one final checkpoint. A gate. A cold, massive, creaking gate carved into the black stone of the underworld. And beside it sat a dog. Well, not just a dog. Cerberus. He wasn't there to sniff your bags or chase your stick. He was there to guard the threshold. One job, keep the dead in and the living out. 3 heads, 1 tail, a coat like midnight, and eyes that saw straight through your excuses. Cerberus wasn't an accident. He was born into a very specific kind of family. His father, Typhon, the monstrous storm being we'll meet later. His mother, Echidna, a serpent woman known as the mother of monsters. Cerberus had siblings too. The Hydra of Lerna, yes, that one. The Chimera, fire-breathing lion-goat-snake hybrid. Orthrus, a 2-headed dog who flunked out of guarding duties early. It was a tight-knit, horrifying little nuclear family. But Cerberus, he got the promotion. Instead of roaming the earth, he was stationed at the most sacred, most somber threshold in all of myth, a bouncer for the land of the dead, and he took that job very seriously. Why 3 heads? Well, the myths don't give a straight answer. But mythology loves 3s. Past, present, future. Birth, life, death. Beginning, middle, end, so perhaps Cerberus's 3 heads each saw one phase of existence. Or maybe they just made it harder to sneak past. Some versions say he had a serpent for a tail. Others say he had 50 heads. Still others gave him a mane of snakes like his cousin Medusa. But what all the stories agree on is this. He was loyal, fierce, unbribable, and not particularly interested in small talk. Unless you were trying to leave the underworld, of course. Then he became very interested. Cerberus rarely left the underworld, but once he was dragged into the sunlight. Enter Heracles. Tasked with completing 12 impossible labors, Heracles eventually found himself with a very strange final assignment. Go fetch the guard dog of Hades. Now, this was not a rescue mission, and it definitely wasn't a walk in the park. Heracles descended into the underworld armed with strength, courage, and the uncanny ability to make gods sigh in frustration. But instead of fighting Cerberus with a sword, he did something we rarely see in Greek myth. He asked. According to some versions, Hades agreed, on one condition. Heracles had to wrestle Cerberus with his bare hands. No weapons, no armor, just man versus monster. Heracles, being Heracles, won. Barely. And he dragged the snarling, snapping, 3-headed beast up into the world of the living. Just for a bit. Then, thankfully, he brought him back. Because even monsters deserve to go home. Beneath the fearsome legends, Cerberus has always had one oddly tender quality. He's a dog. A supernatural, bone-crunching, no-nonsense dog. But a dog nonetheless. And dogs are loyal, even in myths, especially in death. There's something profoundly comforting about the idea of a dog waiting at the edge of the underworld, not to hurt you, but to make sure you're where you're supposed to be. Cerberus didn't punish, he didn't judge, he didn't cast souls into Tartarus or weigh your heart against a feather. He just kept watch, a guardian of boundaries, a monster, yes, but also a caretaker. Of course, not everyone accepted the rule of the dead stay dead. A few brave or foolish mortals tried to sneak into the underworld while still alive, and that meant getting past Cerberus. Some tried to distract him, some tried to bribe him, some brought music. Orpheus, the tragic poet, famously lulled Cerberus to sleep with his lyre. The music was so soft, so mournful, that even a three-headed guard dog couldn't resist. Cerberus slept, and Orpheus passed by, hoping to bring back his wife from death. Spoiler, he failed. But not because of Cerberus. Others were less gentle. They used spells, disguises, or plain brute force. But the most successful crossings, they were the ones that didn't try to defeat Cerberus at all. They respected him, because the Greeks knew sometimes the scariest monsters are just doing their jobs. Over the centuries, Cerberus slipped out of the underworld and into popular imagination. In medieval bestiaries, he became a symbol of gluttony and sin. In Renaissance art, he stood behind Hades like a grim shadow. In modern times, he's been reimagined endlessly. As a Pokemon, as a Final Fantasy summon, as a terrifying creature in Harry Potter, as a lovable three-headed dog in children's books. Even science got in on it, naming a distant, icy object in space, Cerberus Pluto, and a volcano on Mars, Cerberus Fossae. Not bad for a dog who just wanted to be left alone at his post. Cerberus rarely gets a voice in the myths, but if he could speak, maybe he'd say this: I didn't choose to be born a monster, but I chose to stay at the gate, guarding the line between life and death, because someone had to. Cerberus reminds us that not all monsters chase. Some stand still, some wait. Some guard the places we fear to look. And if you ever find yourself crossing a quiet, misty threshold, you might hear a soft growl, or a deep breath, or the sound of paws shifting in ash. And then, in the dark, 3 sets of eyes will open, watching, waiting, not unkind, just doing their job. And when you're where you're meant to be, they'll let you pass. Cerberus has stood guard for thousands of years. Through myth, through war, through all our stories about what waits on the other side. But here, in this soft-spoken story, he's finally allowed to rest. No barking, no fighting, no wrestling with heroes or nipping at poets. Just a good dog. At the end of his shift, 3 heads breathing in sync, tail thumping once in the dust, dreaming of rivers and stars. The gates are shut, the dead are safe. And Cerberus is sleeping. You should too, because the next monster has more than one head, more than one life, and absolutely no respect for scissors. The Hydra awaits, deep in the fetid swamps of Lerna, where the water is still, the air is thick, and even the frogs whisper warnings. Something ancient once stirred. Not a dragon, not a serpent, not exactly, but something in between. Something with too many heads, too many teeth, and far, far too much attitude. They called it the Lernean Hydra, born from the same terrible parents as Cerberus, Typhon, and Echidna. This particular child was less loyal guard dog and more sentient blender with regeneration powers. It lived in the bog, fed on cattle, sometimes wandered out to snack on nearby villagers. And when people tried to kill it, well, That's where things got complicated. The Hydra's most famous trait. If you cut off one of its heads, two would grow back. Which, if you think about it, is kind of rude. Imagine trying to get rid of your problems, only for them to return, louder, angrier, and with backup. It wasn't just a monster. It was a metaphor for fear, for chaos, for the way problems multiply when you try to hack them apart without addressing the root. The Greeks understood this, and then they sent Heracles to handle it anyway. Because when you have a monster in the swamp, sometimes you need a man with a club and no plan. Heracles, already famous for wrestling lions and cleaning divine stables, arrived at Lerna prepared for, well, not much. He brought a sword, some guts, and his cousin Iolaus, who was mostly there for moral support and possibly snacks. The first few heads came off easily, but as soon as they hit the mud, schloop, two more sprouted in their place. That's when Heracles did something unusual. He paused. He thought. And he asked for help. Iolaus, inspired, grabbed a torch. Every time Heracles cut a head off, Iolaus cauterized the neck stump with fire. And slowly, the regeneration stopped. Head by head, they cleared the swamp, until only one remained, the immortal one. The final head of the Hydra could not die, so Heracles lopped it off anyway, and buried it deep beneath a massive rock. Not very elegant, but functional. From the Hydra's corpse, he collected something else. Poison. Its blood was so toxic that even a single drop could kill. Heracles dipped his arrows in it, and thus, even in death, the Hydra continued to kill. Many years later, that poison would cause Heracles' own end, burning through his skin, driving him to build his own funeral pyre, the monster's gift, a legacy of pain. Because some victories don't come clean, and some monsters stay with you. The Hydra is often used as shorthand for a problem with many heads. We say things like, cut one down, two more appear. You can't solve chaos with a sword. Maybe don't live in a swamp full of carnivorous nightmares. But the real power of the Hydra myth lies in how familiar it feels. We've all dealt with Hydras. Stress guilt, regret, inbox notifications. Each time you conquer one, more appear. And like Heracles, you can't win by brute force. You need fire, patience, and someone beside you holding the torch. The Hydra didn't stay in Lerna. It moved through culture like a whisper with too many tongues. In ancient pottery, it was rendered as a coiling threat. In medieval texts, it symbolized heresy and corruption. In modern games and comics, it became a shadow organization, a boss fight, a genetically engineered super beast. It even showed up in Cold War propaganda, because apparently, if you need to symbolize something unstoppable and terrifying, 9 heads do the trick. But under all of that, the Hydra remains one thing above all else, a reminder that monsters are often more persistent than they are powerful. The swamp where the Hydra lived, Lerna, was not just a gloomy set piece. It was sacred. In ancient Greece, Lerna was believed to be an entrance to the underworld, a place where the barrier between life and death wore thin, where the gods whispered through the reeds and time didn't flow quite right. To put a monster there wasn't just atmospheric, it was intentional. The Hydra didn't crawl up from a pit of randomness. She was guarding something, a secret, a crossing, maybe even a truth, that below every civilized city, every well-lit street, every myth of order and justice, there is always a swamp, always a Hydra. And no matter how many heads you cut off, the roots remain. The Hydra didn't speak, it didn't beg, it didn't explain itself. It didn't offer tragic backstory or monologues about vengeance. It just existed. Hungry, maddening, impossible to kill cleanly. It asked no questions. But it was the question. What happens when cutting isn't enough? What happens when you keep trying to solve ancient problems with sharper blades? The Greeks answered with a torch, a burial stone, and a silence that echoed long after the last head fell. But tonight, in this soft and sleepy retelling, the Hydra doesn't hiss, it doesn't rise, it doesn't lunge, it simply curls in the deep and lets the swamp close over it once more, because even endless problems deserve a night off, and so do you. Now, we head somewhere darker, not swamp dark, not underworld dark, maze dark, where the walls shift, where names are forgotten, where a mother gave birth to something that shouldn't have existed, and where the monster waits in silence, with the face of a man and the fury of a bull. Once upon a time in Crete, there was a king named Minos. He ruled with pride. He claimed the favor of Poseidon, and when he asked the god of the sea to send him a perfect white bull as proof of divine right, Poseidon delivered. But Minos didn't do what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to sacrifice the bull. Instead, he kept it, because it was beautiful and sacred, and he thought he could get away with it. The gods, as usual, were not amused. Poseidon cursed Minos, not directly, but cruelly. He made Pasiphae, the king's wife, fall in love with that divine white bull, not metaphorically, not politely, fully, ruinously, obsessively. And through a bizarre combination of magic, craftsmanship, and very bad decisions, Pasiphae ended up giving birth to a child, half man, half bull, all consequence. The creature she bore was unnatural. It had the body of a human child, but horns, hooves, and an appetite that was wrong. Minos, ashamed and afraid, couldn't bring himself to kill the child, but he couldn't let it live freely either. So he called upon Daedalus, the master craftsman, the genius engineer, and said, "Build me a prison so perfect, no one will ever escape it." And Daedalus did. He built the labyrinth, a twisting, shifting maze beneath the palace. No light, no exits, no straight paths. At the center, he placed the boy, the Minotaur. He had no name, only a title, and the world forgot him, except once a year, when they fed him. Crete was powerful, Athens was not. After a bitter war and a devastating loss, the Athenians were forced to pay tribute to Minos. Every 9 years, they sent 7 boys and 7 girls, youths in their prime. They were not diplomats, they were not warriors. They were food, led into the dark, down the winding stairs, into the center of the labyrinth. None ever returned. The people whispered about the Minotaur. Some said he was a beast. Others said he was a prisoner, a victim, a curse, a god. But the maze didn't care. It turned all who entered into shadows, and the Minotaur waited. Eventually, a prince of Athens had enough. Theseus, son of King Aegeus, volunteered for the tribute, but he didn't go to die. He went to end it. When he arrived in Crete, he met Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. She fell in love with him. Maybe. Or maybe she just saw a chance to end the curse too. Either way, she gave him a thread, a simple ball of string, to unwind as he went into the labyrinth, so he wouldn't get lost, so he could find his way out, Because killing the Minotaur was one thing, escaping the maze was another. Theseus entered the maze. The silence was suffocating. The turns never ended. The walls whispered. And somewhere near the center, the Minotaur stirred. Not charging, not roaring, just there. Theseus didn't find a monster. He found a boy grown old in darkness. Feral, mad, half human, half forgotten. They fought. Some say it was epic. Others say it was sad. But either way, Theseus killed the Minotaur and followed the thread back out to applause, to cheers, to songs. No one mourned the beast in the dark, except maybe Ariadne. The Minotaur was born of lust, lies, and a broken promise to a god. But more than that, he was a metaphor for shame, for secrecy, for what we try to bury beneath beautiful palaces. The Greeks weren't just telling a monster story. They were telling a human one. The labyrinth, it's the mind, the trauma, the maze we get lost in when we try to make sense of things that shouldn't be. And at the center of it, the part of ourselves we pretend isn't there. The part that's wild, hurt, angry. The Minotaur didn't ask to be born. He didn't choose the labyrinth. He didn't understand the tribute. He just knew that once a year children came. And then they stopped. Theseus escaped the labyrinth. He took the thread, the story, the girl. But somewhere along the way, he left Ariadne behind. On the island of Naxos, he abandoned her while she slept. No one's sure why. Some say the gods told him to. Some say he panicked. Some say he just didn't care. Either way, it was not a heroic ending. And when he finally returned home, he forgot to change the sails of his ship from black to white as he had promised. His father, Aegeus, watching from the cliffs, saw the black sails and assumed his son was dead. So he threw himself into the sea. And that's how the Aegean Sea got its name. All because of one monster, one maze, and one thread that didn't lead quite far enough. Today, the Minotaur lives on in 1,000 ways. In books, in games, in movies where heroes slay beasts in mirror-lined halls. But sometimes, if you listen closely, the story shifts, and you begin to wonder, was the monster the one in the center of the maze, or the ones who built it? Because the Minotaur didn't build the labyrinth. He just lived in it. He didn't ask for tributes. He didn't ask for a name. He just wanted out. But now, at last, we can let him go. Let the maze collapse into dust. Let the boy bull rest. Because even monsters born of curses deserve silence. And even shame can fall asleep, eventually. The final monster waits. Not in a cave, not in a swamp, not even in a maze, but beneath the storm clouds of the world itself. A creature so massive, so angry, so elemental, that even Zeus, the king of gods, ran screaming. His name is Typhon, and he's not here to play fair. There are monsters, and then there's Typhon. Not a beast, not a man, not even a god. He was the end of the world, wrapped in wings and rage, born of Gaia herself, Mother Earth. Typhon wasn't raised in the usual mythological drama of betrayal and bad parenting. He was summoned, unleashed like a weapon, brought into being as a final act of fury. You see, Gaia was angry. The gods had overthrown the Titans. Zeus had taken the sky, and the old world was dying. So Gaia dug deep into the roots of the earth and gave birth to something that would make the heavens tremble. A storm with claws, a voice of fire, a form that could blot out the stars. Typhon, the last monster. Let's break it down. Typhon wasn't just big, he was impossibly big. Some said his head scraped the stars. Others claimed his eyes shot flame, that his voice was like a chorus of screaming beasts, that his hands were claws, and his legs were serpents. Some myths even say his entire lower half was a nest of writhing snakes, each one as dangerous as a dragon. His wings could block the sun, his body could shake mountains, his breath melted stone, and he didn't want to conquer the world, he wanted to end it. When Typhon rose, the Olympians did something unusual. They panicked. The gods transformed into animals and fled to Egypt. Zeus became a ram, Apollo a crow, Dionysus a goat, Hermes a stork, Artemis a cat. Only Athena stayed behind, furious and unbothered. Eventually Zeus recovered his courage and returned. But it's worth noting, the king of gods ran from this. That's how serious Typhon was. Even immortality looked over its shoulder when he came near. When Zeus finally fought Typhon, the world changed. Mountains cracked, oceans boiled, stars hid. They say the battle shook every corner of existence. Zeus hurled lightning. Typhon caught it in his bare hands. The sky rained fire. The earth bled magma. For a moment, Olympus faltered. And then, Typhon won. He grabbed Zeus, tore the sinews from his hands, crushed him beneath Mount Cassius. And the gods were silent. For the first time in forever, the monsters were winning. But gods don't stay dead. Not in Greek mythology. Zeus, broken but not beaten, was rescued by Hermes and Pan. They stole back his sinews, yes, literal divine tendons, and returned them to him while Typhon slept. Zeus rose, stronger, angrier, and this time, he didn't hold back. He summoned every bolt of lightning in creation. The skies cracked, the heavens roared. The earth itself tried to fold in on the monster, and finally, Typhon fell. Not gently, not quietly, but like a collapsing mountain made of storms and screaming. You can't kill something like Typhon. So Zeus did the next best thing. He buried him. According to legend, Typhon was entombed beneath Mount Etna in Sicily. Every eruption, his rage, every tremor, his attempt to rise. Some say he still lives, breathing fire and whispering curses through cracks in the earth. And if you stand too close during an eruption, you might just hear a voice in the smoke. Not screaming, just waiting. Because monsters like Typhon aren't really defeated. They're just beneath us. Always beneath us. Though Typhon fell, his legacy remained. He fathered monsters, so many monsters. Cerberus, the underworld's guardian Hydra, the swamp serpent. Chimera, the fire-breathing lion goat. Orthrus, the two-headed dog. Sphinx, the riddler of Thebes. Ladon, the dragon of the golden apples. Typhon didn't need to win to matter. He seeded mythology with chaos. Every impossible beast the Greeks ever feared came from him. He wasn't just a monster. He was monstrosity itself. So what was Typhon? A force of nature, a symbol of resistance, an old god the Olympians tried to bury? Or maybe Typhon was what happens when you try to rule a world that still remembers chaos. He's not evil, he's pre-Olympian, older than law, louder than order. The Greeks feared him because he couldn't be reasoned with, he couldn't be bargained with. He wasn't personal. He was the flood, the earthquake, the panic attack at 2 a.m. that doesn't have a name. Typhon is what we lock beneath our cities, our calendars, our rational explanations. And sometimes he stirs. Tonight, though, Typhon doesn't rise. He stays buried, beneath the mountains, beneath the stories, beneath the breath of the world. The sky is clear, the stars are quiet, and the father of monsters sleeps, because even the loudest storm runs out of thunder. Even the deepest rage can rest. Even the monsters that almost broke the gods can stop, just for now. So if your mind has been spinning with too many heads, too many gates, too many labyrinths, too much fire, let it be still. Let Typhon sleep, and let yourself drift, where monsters don't bite, they whisper. So now you know. You've wandered through swamps and storms, tiptoed past sleeping snakes and snarling dogs, threaded your way through mazes and watched gods run from a walking apocalypse. You've met 5 of the most powerful, tragic, terrifying, misunderstood monsters the Greeks ever dreamed up. Medusa, who was punished for surviving and weaponized into silence. Cerberus, the loyal threshold guardian who never left his post. Hydra, the headache that fought back every time you tried to cut it down. Minotaur, born of shame, trapped in a story he never wrote. Typhon, too big for the world, too ancient for the gods, too loud to forget. And yet, here they are, sleeping, not defeated, not erased, just quiet. Because that's the beauty of myth, isn't it? Monsters don't always lose. Heroes don't always win. And sometimes, the scariest things in the story aren't claws or curses, but the way the world chooses who to call a monster in the first place. Mythology isn't about what happened. It's about what we're afraid of, what we can't explain, what we secretly want to stare down in the dark. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about what we want to forgive, including ourselves. So if your thoughts are still spinning, if sleep hasn't quite wrapped around you yet, take one more breath, because here's the secret. You are not the hero tonight. You're the listener, the dreamer, the one walking between stories, quietly nodding at monsters as they pass by. No swords, no shouts, just calm. You've wandered through the dark and come out the other side. That's enough. So close your eyes. Let the myths unravel. Let the serpents curl into silence. Let the maze collapse into pillows. Let the storm settle into distant thunder. You're safe. You're warm. You're here. And the monsters, they're resting too. Good night, wanderer. Sleep well.